if we are to project the new AP Top 25, do we think that Michigan is going to overtake Georgia for number 1?
No.
Hell no. 50 burger on the board against a top 10 team. And despite whatever we have said about Ole Miss,
a top 10 team.
Despite whatever we have said about Ole Miss here on the Cover 3 podcast, same voters that put those Rebels in the top 10 are going to be making the same decisions about what to do with Georgia. Brock Bowers was back. They ran the football effectively. And Ole Miss could do absolutely nothing in this game. It was an ass kicking. I expect that. And look, Ohio State just, I mean, it played a shell of a football team.
Listen, if you're, I want to talk more about Georgia, but if you're Ohio State, be happy with what happened tonight, but don't think it means anything.
Well, all right. So my thought was that if voters want to flip Florida State and Washington, I would understand it. Like if a voter had Florida State at 4, Washington at 5, and they wanted to do it. But here's the thing, and this is where I've got to nerd out just a second, and I promise I'll stop. But Florida State had a significant voting points advantage. It had first place votes that Washington didn't have. It had nearly 100 points in voting points that Washington did not have. When you look at the gaps between the numbers in these rankings, normally we're talking like 30, 50, 60 points are the differences from number to number. Like that was a line. Voters had very much decided on their top 4. Washington was not in it. So even as Florida State only wins 27-20 against rival Miami, I could see Washington with a similar 7-point win, but against an opponent that the voters are going to like more in Utah. I could see some voters doing that flip. I just don't think it's going to happen enough in the consensus for us to see Washington jump ahead of Florida State. I think what we will see in terms of a new gap establishing is 1, 2, 3 gap, 4, 5, and then like we'll start to move from there.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see any changes at all. Like it's the same thing as last week because Oregon is currently up 22-7 on USC. The top 8 teams are all going to win. It's very, very dramatic in the polls.
What?
A week though.
All right, so Florida State. But are you in Tallahassee right now?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So were you
there? I was. Yeah, that was pretty interesting. I thought Miami's defense played its ass off, honestly, and I guess I was like never nervous about it because like Miami, I really didn't think they could score, and they did actually score on that 80-yarder late when the safety and corner ran into each other, and the Miami guy looks around, he's like, "Figure out, cool, I'm gonna run for 80 yards," and I don't know, just like Emory Williams completed 8 passes. I understand why Miami started him. I think if you look at the body language that the Miami players had when Tyler Van Dyke was throwing interceptions late last week against NC State, I mean, they were kind of trash talking him. You know, just it looked bad. I understand why you went with true freshman, but he just really wasn't a threat, right? Miami's defense kept them in that game and played extremely well. Like they played hard. Like I think they're really well coached on defense. Like their blitz schemes were nice. They got the Jordan Travis some. They bowed up in the red zone a little bit. Like I was pretty impressed with Miami's defense. Offensively, they just kept handing it off, try to keep chipping away. And it's like, damn, like you're not going to get margin in this team right now. They also never had the ball with a chance to take the lead, you know, in the final 20 minutes of the game. It was like scored close, feel not close, like, but you know, like. You should handle it if you think you're like a legit national title contender, which I've been pretty consistent on the show. I think like Florida State's a good playoff contender. I don't think I like how they match up against like Georgia and Michigan. And I don't put Ohio State in the same category. Ohio State's offense, I think, is different. But I think they have a really good shot to make the playoff, which for where this team has been, I mean, they were losing to Jacksonville State 2 years ago, right? Like that's a pretty nice turnaround, you know, so.
Tom, do you feel those goalposts moving right now?
No, I think he's been pretty solid about that the entire time. Was the injury to Emory Williams as bad as everybody? Because I didn't see it. I had left the room. I came back in. Everybody I was talking about was like, well, his arm just fell off. Like, was it that bad?
So he's like fully extended.
Yeah.
There was like an air cast on his arm. And then they brought out the cart, and then like 11 people rode off on the cart. I was like, whoa, okay, I hope the cart like doesn't die before it gets to the, to the tunnel. Yeah, I thought he played hard. It's just there was a couple times when like he actually had somebody open and they just couldn't get him.
So they're gonna have to go back to TVD next week.
Well, TVD had to come back in and try to lead the game tying drive.
Yeah, and he was 2 for 7 with an interception.
Yeah.
So Miami's in.
By the way, if you bet player prop unders on TVD, you were going to get all those refunded, and then you won all of them because he had to come in, so he officially played for a snap.
So Emory Williams snapping his arm in two was a hero moment for many out there. Can we go back to the Georgia game?
For 7 Prize Picks users who had yes, of course.
I want to make just my proclamation here because I love him very much. Big Bad Lad is going to have a 10-year NFL career. He's the same thing as Stetson Bennett. Just because he's white and short, he gets written off as just being like a gritty grinder gym rat. The dude is good. As a route runner, he is phenomenal. He creates space. He roasts dudes. He is going to be in the NFL. We all talk about Brock Bowers, deservedly so. We're going to talk a lot about Carson Beck, deservedly so. But do not overlook Big Bad Lad.
Yeah, no overlooking here. McConkey's return to the lineup has been huge for all of the Georgia offense rounding into form right at the perfect time. I mean, this is kind of a masterclass in peaking at the right time against your toughest opponents, getting ready for the ultimate goal, which is to try and go win a national championship. So nobody's sleeping on Big Bad Lad.
No, people are sleeping, Chip. He's going to get drafted. He's going to be a 3rd or 4th round draft pick. He's going to end up on like the Rams or somebody in like that Sean McVay coaching trees offense. And he's going to catch 70 passes a year for 900 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, he's Hunter Renfrow.
I'll ask the same question that Chip asked. Like, did you ever believe? Because Ole Miss scored on that first drive.
Oh, no. Absolutely not.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, that game basically went exactly like I said it on the show, and we talked about it on Big Game Breakdown. I said it in the locks. I said it when I had to give the pick for it on HQ on Saturday before the game started. I said, Ole Miss will get some points. They will move the ball, and they will not get any stops. And that is exactly what happened.
Because that Ole Miss defense has been fraudulent and remains fraudulent as hell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of great
show. I don't know. Everybody should find a college ball show that talked about that this week, and listen to that one.
Listen, it was all of the worst reason. I understand there's a lot to go into the decision of where you want to be as a coordinator on the field or in the booth. And it's probably something with like your own style and, what the head coach wants, and you're trying to be a part of it. But Pete, my guy, maybe if you were in the booth, you wouldn't have gotten as much screen time as you did as your defense was getting cooked by Georgia in this game. Boy, you looked disappointed and without answers in your hoodie on the sideline. Camera's easily able to find old, what should we call him? Like, he's like a Pika Pete. You're just looking like a frat dog there with the curly hair and the hoodie on. It was a rough day for no time did I believe that Georgia was in any danger of losing that game. I would say the big takeaway is Mims comes back and surprise, the offensive line is just mashing people.
Well, it might not
surveys show. Yeah.
It might not be a problem in the long run but I do think like not having Dumas Johnson out there today was a problem with some of the run game stuff early on. They adjusted to it because Ole Miss kind of had to get away from it. But as we go forward, if they get to when they face Alabama in Atlanta, like if it's not fixed by then, that could become a problem. But it's like you're trying to nitpick a very, very good football team without a hole right now.
I have not gotten a chance to watch Ohio State yet, so I don't want to like.
They were great. They were great, but they were playing Michigan State.
Yeah,
and Michigan State is a very bad football team.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out what I get into that a little bit later. One last piece here. Any reason to think that Texas might sputter a little bit, or what do we make of the Longhorns? Quinn Ewers comes back, but Jonathan Brooks leaves the game with an injury. It's extremely concerning. So we'll have our eyes on that one. What do we make of Texas's win at TCU?
Is a good win. Like one of the things I saw from Texas earlier this year was we'd seen them mess around with teams they should beat all the time. And it kind of sometimes come back to haunt them. But we saw them earlier in the season just kind of like not playing to their opponent. Tonight felt like somewhat of a, like just a relapse because that game should have been over. They let TCU make a charge in the fourth quarter. They should have put it to bed before then. It got a little too close. No, they were never in a position to where they could have lost the game really, but just, I don't know, man, you got to stop playing with your food at some point. If you're going to be a team to be taken seriously as a national title contender, you need to, like, Georgia doesn't do that. Michigan doesn't do that. You're doing it. So it's hard to really look at them and say that's a national title contender when they're playing that way.
I tend to agree. I think Texas secondary in particular remains a little bit of concern to me. Like they get up and we know they stop the run really well. But when teams just have to go into like, let's chuck it to get back in this game mode, Texas has a couple times now surrendered the lead or let that lead shrink down. And I think a lot of it is because the Texas secondary is probably the weakness of this Texas football team. That and like some of the drop back passing when they're not off play action, like when Sark's set up and dialing stuff up to those guys. But like Texas in passing downs, both in terms of when they have the ball and especially when they don't have the ball, is a little bit of a concern. They're still really, really damn good. Like I think they're probably the third best team in the country, but we'll see.
Like that power rating,
the D line's phenomenal.
Right, exactly.
I mean, if you're like Georgia, Michigan, and Texas, as far as defensive lines go, are quite erotic. I will give them that. I don't know if I'd have them as the number 3 overall, though.
Yeah.
Like, would you take Ohio State over them? Because I would not. I would take Texas over Ohio State.
I would take Ohio State. It'd be nicer if Kyle McCord took a step forward. But again, Kyle McCord played really good tonight. Ohio State looked great tonight. It's just I don't want to take too much out of it until I see him do it against a team that's not just playing out the string. Like Michigan State got their win last week, and they were like, all right, we've got it. Let's go home, boys.
Right.
Texas at Iowa State as we are sitting here 12:22 a.m. Eastern time. Iowa State with a 31-13 lead against BYU in Provo. Cyclones are good enough to mess around. If Texas doesn't play well, Texas can lose.
Yeah, that's a good qualifier on it. But BYU's this quarterback they're playing right now, BYU is non-competitive without Slovis. Like this second week in a row, this Retzlaff kid they're playing, he can't play. He's 4 of 9 for 30 yards tonight. Did they bench him or is this Kingston kid? Is he? He's a receiver. So they had a receiver throw a pass. Like BYU is basically just they should just run Wildcat because this guy can't play at all so far through like 6 quarters of sample set.
I would say that my reference of the score had less to do with, oh, wow, how awesome is Iowa State, and more just like an in the moment, like, hey, this is the opponent for next week. I think Iowa State is our Big 12 Mendoza line, right? They beat a lot of the bad teams. Yeah, they beat a lot of the bad teams. And they lost to Kansas, they lost to Oklahoma. Like, if Texas messes around, gives Rocco some short fields with turnovers, Jonathan Brooks can't go. Get a little dicey. We'll see.
I For the 60-1 shot, I would strongly prefer Texas not mess around for that game in particular. Like I'm going to need Texas Iowa State. Oklahoma State will have to do its part, but I need Texas to win.
UCLA just lost to Arizona State, by the way.
That's a final now?
It's about to be.
Oh my. Is it because they don't have a quarterback?
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah,
I did not watch the game, but they lost 17-7. So
that's what I thought, because I'd gotten word all week that Garbers was no good. That was not healthy enough to be able to go. And he was trying to go through some practice in limited capacity, but I don't know what UCLA's goals were, but you're 6-4 now with the losing record in conference play, and you just lost to Arizona State.
That lost by like $1 billion to Utah last week.